Hello and welcome to the latest in Art UK's Art Unlocked webinars in collaboration with Bloomberg Philanthropies. My name's Leanne and I'm your host for this evening. I'm the curator of Valence House Museum, which is the local history museum for the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. And you can see a lovely photo there on your screen of the building that we're based in. And I'm going to be giving you an oversight of the art collection that we hold. And I've selected 6 images to look at today that I feel reflect the wider collection at Valence House and also give a little bit of background to the history of Barking and Dagenham. So let's look at the first artwork. Here we see Sir Richard Fanshawe, and he is part of a collection, the Fanshawe Portrait Collection, that is the highlight of the works of art that we have. This is a collection that has been described as being the greatest collection of gentry portraits in the country. And Sir Richard's portrait, which is by William Dobson, actually marks the pinnacle of both the family and of the wider collection. Sir Richard was remembrancer to King Charles I between 1641 and 1644, which was essentially a tax collector. It was his job to remind the king what taxes he was owed. His staff would then go out and collect it for the king. And he was at Oxford with the king when the court went into exile there during the Civil War. And this painting was actually painted whilst at Oxford in 1644. He then becomes ambassador to Portugal in 1662 and actually arranges King Charles II's marriage to the Portuguese princess, Catherine of Braganza, and then becomes ambassador to Spain in 1664, and he dies there in 1666. Now, as I say, this is a painting by William Dobson. This is probably our most famous painting in the collection. It's recently been on display at the Tate as part of their Dobson Spotlight exhibition. And Dobson was actually praised by his contemporary, John Aubrey, as the most excellent painter that England has yet bred. The painting itself is full of symbolism that if we knew how to read this painting, it would tell us everything that we need to know about Sir Richard and the man he is. So front and centre of the painting is this black and white greyhound. The greyhound is a symbol of loyalty, Sir Richard's loyalty to the king, but also you couldn't legally own a greyhound unless you were a certain rank of nobility. So here Sir Richard is proudly displaying that he is a baronet. In his hand, he holds a sheet of paper, which is a symbol of not only his political works as ambassador, but also to his linguistic and artistic works that he was undertaking. So he was a great linguist. He spoke Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and French. And he also was a published poet, and he translated works, most notably the Italian tragic comedy play called The Faithful Shepherd, and also the Portuguese epic poem called The Lusiad. One of the visitors, when I've been given a tour in the museum, they've suggested that the paper is blank as a sign of all his great works to come, which I guess is a possibility. And actually in the background of this painting, I don't know how clear it is for you to see, but there is actually a scene depicted from the Faithful Shepherd, which is of a god emerging from a pool. And actually that scene, and the Faithful Shepherd was actually published in 1644, the same year that this painting was completed. And that scene is actually used as the frontispiece of Sir Richard's translation. Then below Sir Richard, at the very bottom of the frame, we can see this dramatic mask. We may know it today as the award that's given away at the BAFTAs, and that is a sign of his love of the arts. And then behind him, we have a Ptolemaic column, which is a symbol of Sir Richard's wisdom. So everything that you need to know about the man that Sir Richard was is encompassed within this painting. If we go to the next slide, please. Now, Sir Richard, actually, the portrait of Sir Richard is actually just one of 73 portraits that we have in our collection. It's a growing collection, it's a living collection. We had our latest donation just last year. So it's one that we are continually adding to. We also have a growing social history collection relating to the Fanshawe family. We have a substantial archive, including a lot of Sir Richard's diplomatic papers. We also have the wedding dowry for Charles II and Catherine of Braganza. So it's really quite a significant collection, and the family themselves, the Fanshaws, were very intricately woven into the history of Barking and Dagenham. So not only did they own and live in Valence House for a short while, but they also lived in a number of other properties in the borough, and eventually they become the Vicars of Dagenham. So they have a very long interwoven history with the borough. And here I've just chosen a couple of other paintings just to give you an overview of the types of works that we have in there. So we have this really lovely double portrait of Sir Thomas Fanshawe and his wife Margaret, or otherwise known as Peggy, and that's by Sir Peter Lilly, one of 7 portraits by Lilly that we have in the collection. In the middle, we have what's personally my favourite painting in the collection. This is Anne Fanshawe by Marcus Gerrits the Younger. This is one of Marcus Gerrits' famous pregnancy portraits. Anne was married at 19 and unfortunately died at the age of 20 in childbirth. And we suspect that this is probably a posthumous painting painted after Anne died. And then on the far right, we actually have a painting of Sir Richard's wife, Lady Anne Fanshawe, who was really quite a woman. She wrote memoirs for their son. They had 14 children altogether. Only 4 of those survived to adulthood. They were desperate for a son to survive. Their last child that Anne had was a boy. She wrote her memoirs of life with Sir Richard during the Civil War, so that their son would know what sort of father he had. And her memoirs have become one of the greatest accounts of life during that period of British history. And this is actually a painting by Mary Beale, and Lady Fanshawe is actually recorded as sitting for Mary Beale in 1678, so just a few years before she died. Next slide, please. The next artist or artwork that we're going to look at is Henry Gillard Glendony. So it's probably not an artist that many of you will have heard of. He is an artist that we like to refer to as being the borough's first professionally successful artist. So his painting mid to late Victorian era, and here we see his depiction of the local landscape. We have Drake's Mill, windmill. Dagenham has always historically been very known to be a very windy place. We're quite flat, so we do get a lot of wind through here, which is why historically we had isolation hospitals being built in the area, because all of that air blew away the miasma, the bad air. So we did actually historically have a lot of windmills in this area. Glendony lived near Drake's Mill at Marksgate. He lived at Chadwell Heath. So this would have been a local mill that he would have seen regularly. So that's why he would have painted it. And you can see that this is unfinished. The horses haven't been completed there. But as I say, Glendony may not be a name that you recognise, but you may be more familiar with some of his works that are held elsewhere, such as John Dee performing an experiment in front of Elizabeth I, which is held by the Wellcome Collection, the Frost Fair, which is at Grundy Art Gallery, the Bride of Lammermoor, which is at the New Art Gallery of Walsall, plus he's got artworks in the Russell Coates Art Gallery, Royal Holloway London, Kirklees Museum and Sunderland Art Gallery. So his artworks are held much wider than Barking and Dagenham. Because of Glendony's intimate connection to the local area, some of the artworks that we have in his collection, we don't just have this unfinished oil painting, but we also have around 200 sketches by Glendony, And if we move on to the next slide, please, you'll see some of these in our collection. So we have around 200 of his sketches, which include preparatory sketches and other artworks. But we also have, and I've not included them here, but we also have other artworks that he has produced depicting the local area. And they generally tend to be scenes that not most artists would capture, because if they're a travelling artist, but because Glendony is so intimate with the area, he captures the more familial side of things. Things such as he's painted and drawn one of the fighting cocks from one of the local farms. So it's quite a nice little collection for us. But here on the screen, on the left, you can see a depiction of what is called Standing Woman, but we now know to be the preparatory sketch for The Bride of Lammermoor. And this is actually Glendony's daughter, who would act as a model for him. In the centre, we have a dancing couple, and Glendony liked to produce artworks that were of historical and whimsical nature. So this potentially could have been a book cover or a catalogue illustration. We know he did that a lot. And then on the far right, we have an invitation that he designed to St Saviour's Old Boys School Dinner. I'm currently planning at the moment for an exhibition in 2024 that will bring together all of the Glendony collection from the rest of the country, to be displayed alongside all of these preparatory sketches that we have in our collection, to put our collection into context with those finished works. So that's something for you to look out for in the future. Next slide, please. This painting actually has a really lovely story. So this is Mrs. Linsdale with her son Thomas. Mrs. Linsdale was the wife of a Barking fishing smack owner, and in the Victorian period, Barking actually had the largest fishing fleet in the country. And her husband Thomas was also he also owned the Ship Inn in Barking as well. They had a number of children, and this painting was donated to us back in the 1930s by their daughter, Annie, who, upon donating it, believed that she was the child depicted in this painting. We know that there's a companion portrait for this painting in a private collection showing Thomas with their first child, Mary. Annie, who had donated this painting, was the 5th child. So I started to question why Thomas would be painted with their first child, yet Mrs. Linsdale would be painted with their 5th child when all of the children in between survived. It just didn't make sense. So we started to do a bit of research and actually found out that the child depicted in this painting is not a girl, but a little boy. We are told that by the colour of the clothing. Apparently dark colours were used on young children, young boys, before they're breeched. And also the side parting in his hair was a very male thing in preparation for hairstyles that they may have later on, whereas girls would have a centre parting, again in preparation for their hairstyles. The painting was also redated to be around 1837, again through the clothing that Mrs. Linsdale was wearing and her Aphrodite hairstyle. So we were actually able to identify this as being Mrs. Linsdale with her second child, her first son, Thomas, which made a lot more sense in terms of the interpretation of this painting. And there is a whole blog on the Research and Discoveries about this painting on the Understanding British Portraits website, if you want to take a look at that. Next slide, please. Now, this painting may not be everyone's cup of tea. I do like it, but I'm not sure I'd have it on my wall at home. This is called Piping Through the Heather by John Stevenson, and this is a painting of the Dagenham Girl pipers, probably Dagenham's most famous export beside Ford cars, I have to say. The Dagenham Pipers were a bagpipe band that was founded in 1930 by the Reverend Joseph Graves. The Becontree estate, which pretty much encompasses the whole of Dagenham, had just been built, and we had lots of new families moving into this new housing estate with lots of children, and they had nothing to do. So Reverend Graves decided that he wanted to do something to keep the children occupied. He quite liked bagpipes, he quite liked marching bands, so he decided to create the world's first all-female bagpipe playing marching band, and the Dagenham Pipers were born. They were all girls, aged 11, and by the time the girls had turned 14 and had left school, the band became professional and started touring the world. And actually, Hitler became a very big fan of the band. And if my colleague was actually giving you this presentation, he would tell you how the Second World War was actually delayed just so the Dagenham Pipers could get home safely, because they were touring southern Germany at that point. I'm not sure it's strictly true, but it's a good story. And here in this painting, we can actually see Peggy Iris, who was the band's first pipe major. And Peggy was one of two Dagenham Girl Pipers who joined ENSA during the Second World War, entertaining the troops, predominantly in Africa. And they performed over 1,000 performances for ENSA in Africa and were awarded the Africa Star for it. And the girls were very, very famous, as I say. They performed at the 1951 Festival of Britain. Each year they would perform at the Royal Variety Performance. They still exist today, still perform. They come and perform for us at some of our events. And if you speak to anybody from Dagenham about the Dagenham Girl Pipers, they will know what you're talking about, and they have a great, great fondness for the Dagenham Girl Pipers. Next slide, please. This artwork here, Acid Cliff, is one of our most recent acquisitions. So last year, we acquired the entire archive of a local artist called Clive Kidder. So that was almost, or just over 400 works of art. Clive Kidder is more known for his depictions of maritime and aviation vessels, but I have chosen one of his abstract artworks, and amongst his donation, there was about a dozen abstract artworks that he was experimenting with during the 60s and 70s. And this one is one of my favourites because of the colour that's included. Kidder became a professional artist in the 1970s and was actually a member of the Royal Society of Marine Artists and the Guild of Aviation Artists. And if we go to the next slide, you can see some of his more typical artworks. So here, one of his maritime paintings of the Yarra. In the middle, we have one of his airplanes, Evening Flight. And then on the right, we have one of his many landscapes that he donated to us, where he has these wide skies and these sweeping vistas that were inspired by his childhood holidays to Cornwall and Devon. Not all of Kidder's artworks are on the Art UK website yet, but we are slowly uploading more and more of them. And the works that he depicts are quite broad. So he has some very nice portraits that are also on the Art UK websites. If you want to, you can go on there and have a look at more of the Kidder collection that we hold. Next slide, please. So this is the final artwork that we're going to look at, and this is one of our small sculpture collection. And it is a sculpture. It is not a burnt out dumped car, which a lot of people think it is. And this sculpture was commissioned to pay homage to the Ford factory. And of course, for many, many decades, Dagenham and Ford went hand in hand. You couldn't mention one without the other. And this is a Capri Mark I that was designed and made by A.J. Baldwin. Now, the Ford Motor Company has been associated with Dagenham since 1924, but the factory here actually opened in 1931, and the vast majority of people that lived in Barking and Dagenham would have been employed by the Ford factory. However, the Capri Mark I was never actually made at the Dagenham factory. It was chosen as the theme of this sculpture purely because it is an iconic Ford car that everybody remembers and everybody has a memory of. And it's actually very, very popular with our visitors. The Ford factory closed in Dagenham in 2002, unfortunately, which had a massive industrial impact on this borough, much like the closure of the mines in the north of the country, although they do still have a diesel design centre in Dagenham. So yes, I say this is only one, we've only got a small sculpture collection, but this is one of our largest pieces. So as I say, that was a very quick whiz through some of the collection at Valence House, and I hope this has given you a taster of what we have and perhaps inspired you to come and make a visit. Valence House is free to enter, and we're open Tuesday to Saturday, 10 till 4. So all that's left is for me to say thank you for joining me this evening, and thank you to Art UK for inviting me to share the Valence House collection with all of you. I hope you have a lovely evening if you're in the UK, or rest of your day wherever you are across the world. Thank you and good night.